This is a real treat. I'm on the beach. I've come to glorious North Devon, which was once the hub of British surfing in the 60s. Now, a lot of people associate the history of British surfing with Cornwall, but actually a lot of it happened here. And I'm here to meet Pete Robinson, surf historian and founder of the Museum of British Surfing. So Pete, out of all of the things in the world that you can study the history of, why was it the history of surfing that attracted you?
Well, surfing was a big part of my life, and I hadn't really given that much thought to where it had come from. Then I was reading a book written by Tom Blake that was published in 1935, and it said that there was a chap from England planning to paddle the English Channel on one of Tom Blake's Hawaiian wooden surfboards, and I just got me thinking, well, there must be so much more to surfing history in Britain than people just know about. I think, a lot of people just think it came along in the 60s and, it was all the Beach Boys and all that sort of thing. But as I started to dig further and further, this incredible hidden history came to life.
I've surfed all of my life, and I'm very much aware that it's one of those things that people do rather than stop and think, actually there's all sorts of social, cultural, sporting history attached to it. Is there a particular aspect that really interests you?
It is really the early history of surfing that interests me. And
what sort of period are we talking about?
Well, our research has shown, for example, that some Hawaiian princes surfed in England in 1890. And that sort of thing is just absolutely
some
remarkable.
Hawaiian princes surfed in England in 1890, and you've got a board that Edward VIII surfed.
Yeah,
and that's extraordinary. People don't associate English kings with surfing.
No, and I think the whole sort of thing of Hawaiian culture was based around a very royal sort of culture, and the kings and queens of Hawaii, for example, hundreds of years ago, they reserved the best surf breaks for themselves. They rode the biggest, heaviest boards in the biggest, best waves, and the commoners had to basically surf the shore breaks on shorter boards.
Get smashed up on the sand.
And the two couldn't meet. And then, as time went by, you still found this amazing sort of British royal involvement in it as well. So
this link with Hawaii really is interesting, because the history of surfing is also linked with the history of exploration, isn't it? As I understand it, Captain Cook, in one of his global voyages, was one of the first people to describe surfing. Is that right?
Yeah, his third voyage of discovery, as he was travelling around the world. In 1779, they racked up in Hawaii. They saw Hawaiians surfing standing up on surfboards. Now, previously, they'd seen people riding waves for fun, but it had often been in canoes and things like that. And when they arrived in Hawaii, there was this developed board sport. And you can imagine, the crews of those ships had lived in pretty tough conditions for years. And they turn up in some tropical paradise with naked men and women, all bronzed, riding waves into shore that would absolutely scare the living daylights out of them, because most of them couldn't even swim.
And it still looks magical today if you see someone surfing. It doesn't quite make sense, the speed, the fact that the board seems stuck to their feet. And in the 1770s, it must have been extraordinary.
Yeah, they described it back then in the journals that were published as a supreme pleasure. And it's that same thing that drives all of us who are into surfing back to the beach time and time again. Here in the UK, no matter what the weather, whether it's, snow, sunshine, hail, rain, whatever, you just go. If the waves are good, and you still experience that same supreme pleasure when you catch a wave and you ride it well.
The link with Hawaii really interests me as well, because for years Hawaii was associated as the place you go to surf big waves as well. But recently people have been coming from all over the world to surf really big waves off the British coastline.
Yeah, that's true, and I think it goes back to that whole sort of thing of exploration, really, and that as culture develops and as the activity of surfing develops, then people look at waves in different ways. And for many years, for example, people have been going to Giant's Causeway, for example, as a tourist destination to see the amazing sort of rock formations there. And then only a couple of years ago, it was realised that there's an amazing big wave spot right off the coast. That's incredible. It's there. It's visible.
This focus really has been on Ireland and Irish waves, hasn't it?
Yes, and it's the whole of Ireland. From north to south. Because of its position in the Atlantic, it doesn't have the same sort of continental shelf that blocks a lot of the big swells from the mainland here. So Ireland is really well placed to pick up these massive Atlantic swells that are coming in, and they're riding waves in excess of 50 feet off the coast of Ireland.
And that's extraordinary, but it really shows how Britain is really forging a new identity of itself as a big wave spot.
Yeah, absolutely, and it helps to focus people's attention on the UK and Ireland as a whole. For many years, you wouldn't equate surfing and Britain. They just didn't seem to go together, and people from other surfing nations like Australia and South Africa would always be, there's no waves over there, but now people realise that all throughout Europe actually there are world-class waves everywhere. Pretty much in the UK can have world-class waves on its day, from the east coast to Scotland, to here in the southwest and Wales, the Channel Islands. It's a fabulous place to surf.
So from the present day, when we're starting to surf really big waves in the UK, back to the 770s and Captain Cook, there are hundreds of years of surfing history there, and we can cover the surfing itself, the cultural associations, the music, the films attached to it. If someone wanted to get involved in researching the history of surfing, how would they do it?
Well, we're a very small, mainly volunteer-led team here at the Museum of British Surfing, and we're always looking for people to get in touch with us, that we can sort of pass on areas of research to. It could be anything from an object like one of the surfboards that you see around us that perhaps it's been donated, but we don't know its history and we want to find out more about that particular object. Or it could be things like the Hawaiian princes, for example. They were studying here in England, and they got to go to Bridlington, a seaside resort, as a reward.
Hawaiian princes in Bridlington as a reward. That's brilliant.
And that was a reward for good behaviour, basically. And they'd done well in their studies, and they were taken for effectively a week's holiday in Bridlington. Saw waves.
I wonder what they thought of that.
They just went out. They found wood. They made surfboards, and they went surfing. And we know there were other Hawaiian royals who were studying in England in the late 1800s, and that's an area of research that needs to be done now for us, so that we can see if there was more surfing going on than we know about now.
But I mean, even talking about Bridlington's interesting, because it's not where you'd necessarily expect there to be a lot of surfing.
No.
We're here in the north coast of Devon, where everyone surfs, and I spend a lot of time in Cornwall. Everyone thinks maybe West Country, not necessarily Bridlington, but it's all around the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of the same thing with a surfer today. You travel around, whether it's in this country or somewhere else, and if you're around the coast, you're just going, oh, I could ride that wave. And they were doing exactly the same thing nearly 125 years ago. Yeah. They literally racked up, saw waves, and thought, where can we get some wood to make surfboards from?
That's really interesting.
So, I think we've developed this history of British surfing, which is much more exciting and interesting than people ever thought. Yeah. But I still think we're only scratching the surface with it, and I think there's much more to be revealed.
Well, this is your Antiques Roadshow moment, because I've actually brought something which I'm going to show you. This is something that I've found. Here we go. What do you think of this?
Well, that's amazing. What we've got here is a very early belly board. They were ridden prone. It was one of the original forms of Hawaiian surfing, was riding the boards lying down on the waves, either for kids or for people who didn't have the ability to stand up on the boards. But it caught on as an activity in its own right, particularly here in the UK. And what we've got here is something probably from the 1920s or 30s. It's a solid wooden board, probably made of ash. and then of course decorated with this incredible artwork. So it shows a real pride in Cornish culture and probably a great love for surfing. And this is what we're finding now that we have the museum open. People are coming in with objects like this and they're saying, my family did this, here's some photographs of this. We have some film showing our family surfing in the 1930s or in the 1920s. So I think, you know, gradually as time goes by, we're going to build up this amazing resource.
And it'd be worth saying now, actually, if any of you out there have got painted surfboards from the 1920s, get in touch with Pete at the Museum of British Surfing in Braunton. And can you please find out why this has got a unicorn on it? What a weird thing for a Cornish surfboard to have. This is such a wonderful place. Will you show me around? Let's have a look at some of these boards.
Yeah.